I came to Daggerland, Ohio because I convinced myself a small-town badge might finally give me peace. After 15 brutal years working homicide in Cleveland, with crime scenes that stayed burned behind my eyelids, I thought I'd earned a quiet chapter. A sheriff's job in a place with fewer than 3,000 people felt like the closest a cop like me could get to early retirement. No back-alley murders, no gang retaliation cases, no parents pretending their toddler fell down the stairs when the bruises told a different story. But the Morrison case broke me in ways I still don't like admitting. A father shattered his 2-year-old with a tire iron, then cried crocodile tears to 911. Watched him walk on a loophole. I went home that night, stared at a glass of bourbon, and decided I was done letting real monsters sit across from me in interrogation rooms pretending to be human. So when the Daggerland posting hit my desk the next morning, practically glowing like some cosmic hint, I took it. The previous sheriff had died of a heart attack, the town needed someone fast, and I was stupid enough to believe a quiet forest town would be simple. The map showed nothing but houses, diners, and miles of trees. A place where the biggest emergencies were missing pets and weekend drunks stumbling out of bars. My first week. I barely knew where they hid the coffee filters when Deputy Mendez walked in with a look that punched a hole straight through my optimism. She was around 30, competent, calm, but always carried a tension around her eyes like she knew something everyone else pretended not to see. "Sheriff Lost," she said, voice steady but tight, "we've got a missing child. Samantha Granger. 7 years old. Last seen yesterday evening. Kid vanished between 6 and 8 while dinner simmered inside. No custody disputes, no sign of forced entry, no suspicious neighbors. Clean on paper, which always meant something was very wrong off paper." Mendez hesitated before finishing her briefing, her eyes drifting, not toward the crime scene photos, but toward the thick wall of forest behind the Granger property. "You should see it yourself," she said quietly. And that was the moment Daggerland stopped being simple. The Granger place sat at the far end of Maple Street, right where the last row of houses surrendered to the forest. I'd noticed on my first patrol that every road in Daggerland seemed to kneel before those trees, like the town knew better than to push any farther in. The oaks and pines behind the Granger yard were impossibly tall, their trunks thick and ancient, the kind of growth that makes a man feel small even in broad daylight. Mrs. Granger met us at the door, eyes swollen and hands trembling. She was around 35, worn down from too many double shifts and too much life happening too fast. "Sheriff, she doesn't wander," she said, voice cracking. "Samantha is scared of the dark. She won't even use the bathroom at night unless the hall light's on." The backyard was small, cluttered with cheap toys, an old swing set, and a sandbox that had seen one too many summers. A chain-link fence separated the grass from the trees, except for a warped gap in the far corner where the metal bowed outward. A kid could slip through it without trying. I crouched at the back fence and saw what no cop wants to see on a missing child call, small sneaker prints, clear in the damp soil, heading straight toward the woods. Not running. Not stumbling. Walking. Steady. Willing. The trail slipped through the break in the fence and continued a few feet into the tree line. Then, 10 feet past the boundary, the tracks simply ended. They didn't fade. They didn't scatter. They just stopped in the middle of soft forest earth that should have held impressions for days. I've tracked suspects through alley snow and crime scenes soaked in blood. You always get something. A drag mark. A scuff. A broken twig. Something. But here, Samantha walked into the woods and vanished as if gravity stopped applying to her. "Mendez," I said quietly, "you seeing this?" She nodded, but her posture was wrong. Instead of inspecting the ground, she kept her gaze away from the deeper woods, like the shadows between the trees were watching her back. I asked the routine question anyway. "Any wildlife out here? Bears? Coyotes?" "No predators," she said too quickly. "The woods are safe. If you stay on the marked trails." The way she said it dug under my skin. Safe wasn't supposed to have conditions. I ran the full protocol, photos from multiple angles, stride measurements, soil compression checks. The gap in the fence was old, worn smooth by years of use. Kids had been sneaking in and out long before Samantha. We canvassed the neighbors. David Winters next door had been home with his son, Owen. David seemed steady, dependable. The kind of guy small towns trust without thinking. Owen, though, kids see things adults explain away. Adults explain away. She was by the fence, Owen said, quiet but certain. Then she stopped playing. She was listening to something. I couldn't hear it. But she could. Listening to what? He didn't know. But he mimicked the stillness perfectly, a frozen, obedient pose, like a child hearing a voice only they understand. Then he said she calmly packed her toys, walked to the gap in the fence, and stepped into the trees. Not lured. Not frightened. Like she'd been called. By sundown, every house told the same story: sympathy, fear, and discomfort whenever the woods were mentioned. Daggerland liked pretending its problems were small, but the way people shut down at the word "search party" told me the real truth. They weren't afraid Samantha was lost. They were afraid of what she might have gone to. And by then, I could feel it too, something in those trees, old enough to make the shadows feel alive, watching us from the moment we stepped into its territory. By the time the neighbors were done giving me their carefully edited concern, the sun had started dropping behind the tree line. The forest swallowed the last light like it had been waiting for it. I went back to the Granger yard one more time, hoping dusk might reveal something daylight hadn't. It didn't make things clearer. It made them worse. The shadows stretched across the yard like long fingers reaching for the house. The air felt colder by several degrees, as if the forest carried its own weather system. While Mendez radioed updates to dispatch, I stepped deeper toward the fence line. That's when I spotted it, caught on a thorn branch about 15 feet inside the tree line. A small, pink scarf. Torn. The same scarf Samantha wore in her school photo. No blood. No drag marks. Just a clean tear, like something snatched it off without breaking stride. I bagged it and stared into the thickening dark. The trees were so tall and so tightly packed that twilight didn't survive between them. It was night inside the woods long before it was night anywhere else. Every instinct in my body screamed the same message: a child shouldn't be in there. Not alone. Not with whatever made those footprints end in mid-earth. By the time the neighbors were done giving me their carefully edited concern, the sun had started dropping behind the tree line. The forest swallowed the last light like it had been waiting for it. I went back to the Granger yard one more time, hoping dusk might reveal something daylight hadn't. It didn't make things clearer. It made them worse. The shadows stretched across the yard like long fingers reaching for the house. The air felt colder by several degrees, as if the forest carried its own weather system. While Mendez radioed updates to dispatch, I stepped deeper toward the fence line. That's when I spotted it, caught on a thorn branch about 15 feet inside the tree line. A small, pink scarf. Torn. The same scarf Samantha wore in her school photo. No blood. No drag marks. Just a clean tear, like something snatched it off without breaking stride. I bagged it and stared into the thickening dark. The trees were so tall and so tightly packed that twilight didn't survive between them. It was night inside the woods long before it was night anywhere else. Every instinct in my body screamed the same message: a child shouldn't be in there. Not alone. Not with whatever made those footprints end in mid-earth. 15 years of experience told me to call in a full search operation immediately. K-9 units. Floodlights. Volunteers. Standard missing child protocol drilled into me by every detective I'd ever worked under. But some deeper part of me, the same instinct that saved my life more times than I can count, whispered something different. Standard procedure isn't going to work here. 3 days later, that whisper started to feel like a warning I should have carved into stone. Because 3 days after Samantha vanished, another child disappeared. I was halfway through my morning coffee, trying to understand why the previous sheriff had left behind such thin case files, when Mendez walked into my office again wearing that same stiff, uneasy expression. "Sheriff, we've got another one. Josh Maddox. 9 years old. Went missing last night. Same circumstances." Coffee turned to acid in my throat. 2 missing kids in a week in a town this size wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't random. It wasn't anything human. It was a pattern. The Maddox house sat 3 blocks from the Grangers, another backyard pressed against that endless wall of forest. Josh's mother was shaking so badly she couldn't stand still. "He never goes near the woods," she insisted. "He's terrified of them. He won't sleep without a nightlight. He wouldn't go in there, Sheriff. He wouldn't." But the ground told a different story. Small sneaker prints, size 3, walked calmly to the trees, slipped through a gap in the fence identical to the one at the Granger place, and continued a short distance into the woods before vanishing the same impossible way. Same direction. Same ending. Same silence. The forest didn't just feel old anymore. It felt hungry. The Maddox property pressed against the same suffocating forest wall, but standing there felt different this time. Heavier. Like the woods already knew we were coming. Josh's mother hovered behind us, wringing her hands so hard her knuckles went white. "He wouldn't go in there," she kept saying. "Josh is scared of everything. He jumps at shadows. He sleeps with his door cracked open and the hall light on. He wouldn't step into those trees." But the prints were right there in the soil, steady, deliberate steps heading straight toward the tree line. And, just like Samantha's, they ended abruptly a few feet inside the woods, swallowed by soft earth that should have shown every movement. I'd seen enough. 2 missing children in a town this tiny didn't happen without a predator. In Cleveland, that meant we were looking at a kidnapper or a serial offender working a territory. But this didn't feel like any case I'd ever worked. Predators leave signs. Disturbance. Panic. Drag patterns. There was none of that. Just obedient steps and vanishing tracks. While Mendez documented the scene, a voice called out from the property line. "Sheriff, anything I can do?" It was David Winters, the neighbor who told me about seeing Samantha by the fence the day she disappeared. He was breathing hard, like he'd run the whole way after hearing the call through his radio scanner. Behind him, I saw the same fatherly panic I'd seen 100 times in Cleveland, but something else too. He knew these woods better than most. "Actually, yes," I said. "I'm organizing a search team." In the city, that meant dozens of volunteers, tactical support, trained units. In Daggerland, it meant David. 2 guys from the volunteer fire department. And Mendez. 4 people searching a forest that felt endless. I split us into pairs, assigned grids, and set strict instructions. Stay on marked trails. Stick to your partner. Radio check every 30 minutes. We started from Josh's last known position and worked outward, sweeping in slow, deliberate arcs. It should have felt routine. It didn't. Every footstep felt like we were waking something up. David and I took the eastern trail. He walked with the quiet familiarity of someone raised among these trees. "How long you lived here?" I asked, more to keep my nerves in check than anything else. "All my life," he said. "This town, it's a good place for kids." Then he paused. Usually. There it was again, that same careful phrasing everyone in this town used when talking about the forest. "How often do kids get lost out here?" I pressed. A long silence stretched between the trees. "Sometimes," he said. "More often than people like to admit." We were maybe 20 minutes into our grid when we heard it. A faint voice. A child's voice. "Help, please. I can't get out." David and I froze. It came from somewhere off the trail to our left. Every rule I'd set for the search team shattered instantly. "Josh!" I shouted. "Sheriff, help me." David didn't hesitate. Neither did I. We pushed through the underbrush, branches clawing at our clothes, the forest suddenly colder than it had been seconds ago. Then, behind a fallen log, curled into himself like he was trying to disappear, we found Josh Maddox. Dirty. Scratched. Shaking. Alive. I knelt beside him. "Josh, you're okay now. You're safe." He lifted his head, and something in his eyes told me this boy had seen things a grown man shouldn't. "He's still out there," Josh whispered. "The tall man. He was watching me all night." My blood went cold. "What tall man, Josh?" His bottom lip trembled. "The one with the big smile." Before I could ask anything else, the temperature around us dropped so fast my breath fogged the air. The forest went dead silent. Not quiet. Dead. No birds. No insects. No wind. Even the leaves seemed to freeze mid-movement. That kind of silence only happens in two situations. When something huge is stalking nearby. Or when everything else is too scared to make a sound. Josh clung to David's sleeve. "He's still here," he whispered. He followed me. David shot me a look, fear mixed with something darker. Recognition. I had my hand on my holster when I saw it. Movement between the trees. Not a person. Not an animal. Something standing impossibly tall, its form stretched thin between the trunks. 30 yards away, unmoving, watching us with a stillness that felt intentional, sentient. I lifted my gun. "Police. Step out where I can see you." The thing didn't step. It glided. A shift of shape, like darkness rearranging itself into the outline of a figure. And even from that distance, I could see it. The smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. Too wrong to belong to anything alive. Josh buried his face in David's jacket. "That's him. The smiling man. Don't let him take me again." I fired. Clean centermass shots, the kind that end standoffs in seconds. The rounds tore through air like nothing was there. The figure didn't flinch. Didn't bleed. Didn't react. It just tilted its head, as if curious. That was the moment I realized none of my training meant anything out here. "Sheriff," David hissed, gripping my arm, "we need to run. Now." But the thing didn't chase us. It herded us. Every time we stumbled off the direction of the trail, branches cracked behind us, pushing us sideways. Steering us. Guiding us back out of the woods like a sheepdog directing its flock. It didn't want us deeper. Not yet. We burst out of the trees, lungs burning, Josh sobbing into David's chest. Behind us, the tree line stood still again, as though the forest had closed over whatever nightmare had followed us. My revolver was empty. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely holster it. "What was that thing?" I asked. David stared at the woods with hollow eyes. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But it's been here longer than this town." That night, after Josh was checked out by paramedics and returned to his mother, I sat alone in my patrol car outside the station, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Trying to fit it into some logical box. Some explanation that made sense. A person in a costume. No. No human moves like that. A forest trick. No trick explains bullets going through something that shouldn't be there in the first place. Hallucination. Then why did David and Josh see it too? 15 years in homicide teach you a lot. How to read blood spatter. How to identify lies. How to recognize when you're being played. They also teach you when you're dealing with something that doesn't fit the world you thought you understood. This thing didn't fit anything. By dawn, one truth had settled deep in my bones. Whatever lived in those woods wasn't done. And we were nowhere near ready for what was coming. By sunrise, my mind felt like it had been put through a grinder. I kept replaying every detail, the creature's height, the way it glided, the way bullets ignored it like it wasn't made of anything solid. Josh's trembling voice calling it, the tall man. The forest going corpse-silent seconds before it appeared. But what twisted my gut the most wasn't the creature. It was the town. Because the next morning, when I walked into the station expecting panic, chaos, emergency meetings, anything that matched the 2 missing kids and a third nearly taken, I got something else entirely. Silence. Routine. A town pretending nothing had happened. People nodded politely. Windows opened at sunrise. Kids walked to school like nothing stalked the tree-line. Even my own deputy, Mendez, typed away at her desk like she wasn't in the woods with me yesterday. Like she didn't feel the temperature drop. Like she didn't see something impossible glide between the pines. She didn't ask about Josh. She didn't ask about the thing. She didn't ask about the shots I fired. She didn't ask anything. After 15 years interrogating suspects, I recognize avoidance when I see it. And Mendez wasn't just avoiding the topic, she was terrified of it. For 3 days, I watched the town like a detective studies a crime scene. The sideways glances. The way conversations died the moment I walked into a room. The way no one dared look toward the forest from Main Street. The way Mendez stiffened every time I even mentioned a search. Everyone knew something. Everybody. Except me. I'd filed the official report, clean, sanitized, leaving out the part where I emptied a revolver into something that shouldn't exist. What was I supposed to write? Subject was a non-corporeal humanoid with predatory behavior and inhuman dimensions. They'd ship me to a psych eval before the ink dried. So I kept the truth off paper and waited for someone to slip up. For 3 days, nobody did. Until Thursday morning. Mendez was halfway out the door for patrol when I stepped in front of her. "We need to talk about what happened in the woods," I said. "Sheriff, Josh Maddox was found safe," she answered mechanically. "Case is closed." "That's not what I asked." Her hand tightened around her keys. Slight tremor. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what you think you saw, sir." That was a lie. A clumsy, frightened lie. "Carmen," I said quietly, "what aren't you telling me?" She froze. Shoulders rigid. Breath shaking. Then, barely above a whisper. "Some things are better left alone. For everyone's safety." "Whose safety?" I pressed. "The children's? The town's? Yours?" She swallowed hard, backing toward the door. "Sheriff, please don't ask questions you don't want answers to." Then she was gone. Practically fled the building. I stood in my office, surrounded by old case files, Mendez's fear buzzing in the air like static. That was when I realized something chilling. Every sheriff before me had stood in this exact room, asking the exact same questions. And the town had trained them to stop. But I wasn't built to ignore the truth. And if this town wasn't going to help me, I was going to dig until it screamed. That afternoon, something Mrs. Patterson had said during the first investigation clawed its way back into my mind. Children have gotten lost in those woods before. Not a general warning. Not a worried grandmother talking about kids wandering too far during playtime. It sounded like history. Like memory. Like experience. She had lived on Oak Street for 40 years. Long enough to remember cases that never made it into the official archives, long enough to know the gaps the sheriff's office intentionally left in its reports. So I drove to her house. She was in her front yard, tending to roses that somehow bloomed even in the shadow of the forest. She moved slowly but deliberately, like someone who'd spent a lifetime navigating a world much darker than anyone realized. "Mrs. Patterson," I said, stepping toward the fence, "I need to talk to you about the woods." Her hands froze mid-air. For a long moment she didn't look up. Then she lifted her eyes, and in them I saw recognition. Not of me, of the question. Like she'd heard it before from men who wore the same badge. "Sheriff," she whispered, "this kind of conversation is better had indoors." She glanced at the forest as she spoke. Not casually. Not nervously. Respectfully. Fearfully. Inside, the living room felt like a time capsule, old carpet, wood paneling, furniture sealed beneath plastic covers that crackled when you sat down. The curtains were already drawn, but she checked them twice before sitting across from me. "I saw something in those woods," I told her. My voice didn't shake, but hers did when she placed the teacup on the table. "Sheriff, decent people don't talk about what lives out there. 2 children have gone missing in 1 week," I said. "You think I can leave that alone?" She inhaled sharply. 2 in 1 week is unusual. There it was again. That careful word this town kept using. Unusual. Not impossible. Not shocking. Just unusual. How unusual? I asked. She didn't answer at first. She stood, moving slowly to a wooden secretary desk in the corner. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a thick photo album, old enough that the leather cracked when she opened it. Inside were childhood photos, school portraits, family snapshots, kids smiling with missing teeth and messy hair. Except these were not her children. "These are the ones the town remembers," she said. She turned the pages. A boy from 1962, freckles, gap-toothed smile. Gone while playing outside after school. A girl from 1974, found alive but never spoke again. A boy from 1983, never recovered. Mother moved away in grief. A girl from 1991, found but changed, she whispered. Died years later. Nothing anyone did could bring her back to herself. Page after page. Decades of missing children. All matching the same pattern, footprints leading into the woods, then nothing. My stomach tightened as I flipped through the pages myself. It didn't feel like looking at old photographs, it felt like looking at evidence. Evidence no sheriff before me had ever dared file. "Mrs. Patterson," I asked, voice low, "what's taking these children?" She closed the album with trembling hands and held it to her chest like armor. "Sheriff," she whispered, "some truths rot you from the inside. Once you learn them, they never let you go. Are you sure you want to pay that price?" I thought of Samantha. Of Josh shivering in the dirt. Of the smiling thing between the trees. And of the way the town refused to look at any of it. "Yes," I said. "Tell me." She checked the curtains one more time before speaking. "There's something in those woods. Something older than our town. Older than our stories. The old-timers had a name for it, but names have power, and some names are better left buried." Her voice shook as she continued, each word sounding like it had been carried for decades. "It doesn't want all children," she said. "It chooses. It always chooses." My jaw tightened. Chooses based on what? Her fingers tightened around the photo album. "Goodness," she whispered. "Purity. The children who still believe the world is kind. The ones who haven't learned cruelty yet. It can sense them, like a scent on their skin." An icy weight settled in my chest. Samantha, quiet, careful, well-behaved. Josh, nervous, gentle, terrified of the dark but brave enough to hide in the woods all night. They fit her description too perfectly. "How long has this been happening?" I asked. She exhaled, a sound full of tired resignation. Long before I was born. My grandmother told me stories her grandmother told her. Some say it came with the first settlers. Others say it was already here and the settlers simply learned how to live beside it. And the town just accepts this? I asked, disbelief sharpening my voice. Her laugh cracked in the middle, brittle as old glass. What choice do we have? Call the FBI. Tell them a creature made of shadow steals good children into the woods. The entire town would be thrown into institutions. I paced the room, fury boiling in my chest. Someone must have tried to stop it. Oh, Sheriff, many have tried. She opened the album again, this time to a section filled with yellowed clippings. One headline read, "Local Sheriff Killed in Hunting Accident." Except the details described something far worse, his body found torn apart across a quarter-mile of forest. Officially blamed on an unknown animal. Another clipping described a sheriff in 1981 who tried to burn out a section of woods. 2 weeks later, his house burned down at midnight. His wife and daughters died inside. Fire department blamed faulty wiring, but he'd just upgraded it months prior. They fit her description too perfectly. How long has this been happening? I asked. She exhaled, a sound full of tired resignation. Long before I was born. My grandmother told me stories her grandmother told her. Some say it came with the first settlers. Others say it was already here and the settlers simply learned how to live beside it. And the town just accepts this? I asked, disbelief sharpening my voice. Her laugh cracked in the middle, brittle as old glass. What choice do we have? Call the FBI. Tell them a creature made of shadow steals good children into the woods. The entire town would be thrown into institutions. I paced the room, fury boiling in my chest. Someone must have tried to stop it. Oh, Sheriff, many have tried. She opened the album again, this time to a section filled with yellowed clippings. One headline read, "Local Sheriff Killed in Hunting Accident." Except the details described something far worse, his body found torn apart across a quarter-mile of forest. Officially blamed on an unknown animal. Another clipping described a sheriff in 1981 who tried to burn out a section of woods. 2 weeks later, his house burned down at midnight. His wife and daughters died inside. Fire department blamed faulty wiring, but he'd just upgraded it months prior. Attempt after attempt, every one ending in tragedy. Not to the hunters. To their families. This thing doesn't just protect itself, she whispered. It punishes. It warns. It maintains balance. If someone pushes too hard, it takes something precious from them. My skin crawled. So what's the arrangement? What does the town give it? There is no formal agreement, she said. No ritual. No offering. Just understanding. As long as no one interferes too much, it takes what it needs and nothing more. What it needs, I repeated, the word sour in my mouth. One child every few years, she said. Sometimes two, if it's been quiet for a long time. Always from families already struggling. Always a child the town believes it can quietly grieve. Her voice broke as she wiped her eyes. But this week, 2 children from stable homes? That hasn't happened in decades. Something has changed. My pulse hammered in my ears. Mrs. Patterson, who else knows? She didn't hesitate. The mayor. The town council. Families who've lived here long enough. And every sheriff for the past 60 years. My stomach twisted. Every sheriff. Including the man whose files I'd been reading. Including Mendez's former boss. Including the one who died of a heart attack right before I arrived. The truth hit me like a punch. This town didn't hire a sheriff. It recruited a replacement for someone who knew too much. My pulse slammed against my ribs as her words sank in. Every sheriff. Every single one before me knew children were being taken. Knew something lived in those woods. Knew it wasn't human. And they all chose silence. The files in the basement flashed through my mind, reports that started thorough and ended abruptly, stamped with neat little conclusions like no evidence of foul play or likely runaway. Dozens of cases that had been buried so deeply the town pretended they never existed. They knew, I muttered. They all knew. Mrs. Patterson lowered her gaze. Some truths are unbearable, Sheriff. Knowing them doesn't make you brave. It just makes you responsible. I wasn't sure if she meant that as a warning or a judgment. And Mendez? I asked. My deputy. She's been avoiding every conversation about the woods. Mendez is a good woman, Mrs. Patterson said gently. Good enough to fear the truth. Good enough to stay quiet. She's seen what happens to people who ask too many questions. I clenched my fists. The walls felt like they were closing in. The creature's lair, I said. Where does it take the children? Where does it hide them? Her reaction was immediate and violent. Sheriff, no. You cannot go looking for it. Where? She stood abruptly, gripping my arm with surprising strength for someone her age. Her eyes were wet with terror, not sadness. If you go down there, you won't come back. No one does. Where? I repeated. Her voice collapsed into a whisper. The old mining tunnels. From before the town existed. 2 miles past the end of the map trails, hidden in a cluster of dead oaks that never grow leaves. Locals avoid them even in daylight. Tunnels, I echoed. So it doesn't just hunt in the forest. It lives below it, she said. Deep. Deeper than any map shows. And it's not alone down there. She walked to her bookshelf, trembling, and pulled down another folder, this one thinner, but older. Inside were hand-drawn maps, charcoal sketches, and notes written in desperate handwriting. Those tunnels go on forever, she whispered. People who go down there don't come up. Not whole. Sometimes not alive. What about the children it takes? I asked. Are they alive? She closed her eyes. Alive, isn't the word I'd use. A cold weight slammed into my chest. Mrs. Patterson, I said quietly, I'm not letting those kids die. Tears welled in her eyes, not grief, but pity. You can't save them, Sheriff. You must understand this. The moment it chooses a child, that child is already lost. Even the ones who escape, they come back wrong. Her shoulders sagged beneath the weight of decades of sorrow. The kindest thing you can do, she whispered, is learn to live with it. Like the rest of us have. I stepped toward the door. I didn't know if my anger was hot or cold anymore. All I knew was that I refused to be another sheriff who filed clean reports while children vanished into the dark. Sheriff, she said softly, one last warning trembling on her lips, there's one more thing I never told you. I turned. It doesn't just choose good children, she whispered. It chooses the ones who shine. The ones who believe the world still has light. The ones who make this place bearable. Her voice cracked. It takes the children the town can't afford to lose. Those words chased me out of her house and followed me across the lawn like a shadow trying to keep up. David Winters was waiting for me when I stepped out of Mrs. Patterson's house. He wasn't standing, he was collapsed against his car like somebody had pulled all the bones out of him. His face was the color of ash, eyes red, cheeks streaked like he'd been crying for hours. The moment he saw me, he didn't speak. He just said 3 words that hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. Sheriff, they took Owen. It felt like the world slammed sideways. I'd braced myself for it, after everything Mrs. Patterson told me, after realizing the creature targeted children who still believed in goodness, after remembering the quiet, observant boy who had watched Samantha slip into the woods. But being ready doesn't stop the blow from landing. When? I asked. An hour ago, he said, voice cracked and shaking. He was playing in the backyard while my wife cooked dinner. I checked on him, he was gone. He squeezed his eyes shut. Footprints. Straight to the trees. Then nothing. The exact pattern. The exact method. The creature had chosen its next child. No hesitation. No break between victims. It wanted something. It wanted now. I can't lose my boy, Sheriff. I can't. His voice fractured on the last word. For a moment, the anger hit me so hard I nearly couldn't breathe. Not at David. At the town. At the creature. At every sheriff who let this happen. At the tunnel running under my feet like a grave full of stolen children. David, I said, I know where it takes them. His head jerked up. Then we go get him. It's not that simple, I warned. The thing in those woods isn't human. It isn't something we can cuff or negotiate with. He stepped forward, gripping my arm with shaking hands. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it wants. Owen is my son. The fear in his eyes burned into something harder. Determination. Rage. A father walking into hell because the alternative was unthinkable. I looked back toward Mrs. Patterson's curtained windows, toward the house full of memory and horror and warnings, and felt something settle inside me. A choice. Maybe it was the worst one I'd ever make. Maybe it was the only one I ever could make. We'll need equipment, I said. Road flares. Flashlights. Weapons. And, something else. David frowned. What? Mrs. Patterson said the creature only takes good children, I said. The pure ones. The kind who don't know cruelty yet. I met his eyes. If we're going down there, we need to make damn sure it doesn't want us. He stared at me, confused. How do we make ourselves bad, he asked. I don't know, I admitted. Lie. Steal something. Think selfish thoughts. Maybe just wanting revenge is enough. It sounded stupid out loud. Like a man throwing superstition at a monster made of nightmares. But at this point, logic wasn't helping anyone. David didn't argue. He didn't laugh. His face told me what I already knew. There was nothing he wouldn't do to get his child back. We drove to my place. I loaded everything I owned, my service revolver, my backup handgun, the 12-gauge I'd brought from Cleveland. David grabbed a hunting rifle and a look in his eyes that said he was already halfway gone. We didn't speak much. Some missions are too dark for words. When the car rolled to a stop at the end of the marked trails, where the forest swallowed the world whole, the silence hit us like a punch. Even the night felt like it was holding its breath. Somewhere ahead, deeper in those woods, a boy was waiting. And we were the only two fools willing to walk into the dark after him. The forest swallowed us fast. Within minutes, the trail behind us disappeared, consumed by thick undergrowth and a darkness that didn't match the time of day. It wasn't night yet, but the deeper we walked, the more the light dimmed, like the sun was reluctant to follow us into this place. David walked ahead, rifle tight against his shoulder, jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. I kept scanning the tree line, listening for anything, footsteps, breathing, the unnatural silence that had followed us days earlier. But tonight wasn't silent. The forest murmured. Leaves rustled without wind. Branches creaked like something heavy moved past them. Every sound felt intentional, like the woods were whispering warnings, or invitations. Half a mile in, David stopped so suddenly I bumped into him. What? I whispered. He didn't answer. He was staring at the ground. There, pressed into the dirt, were small footprints. Owen's. Fresh. The prints led forward, but beside them was something else. Something wrong. Long, thin impressions in the soil, like talons dragging through the dirt. They didn't follow Owen's steps, they overlapped them. Surrounded them. Shadowed them. As if the creature walked with him. As if it guided him. David's breath hitched. He reached down and touched one of the footprints like it was a piece of his son he could hold on to. "He's alive," he whispered. "He has to be." "We keep moving," I said. But the forest didn't want to let us. Branches leaned inward, narrowing the path. The air grew heavier, thicker, colder. At one point, the temperature dropped so fast my flashlight flickered. I tapped it twice and it steadied, but something told me the forest was testing us. Daring us to keep going. 2 miles in, the trees changed. Every trunk around us stood dead, pale, and stripped of bark. No leaves. No life. Just a circle of skeletal oaks rising from the earth like gravestones. The place Mrs. Patterson had described. The forest thinned ahead, revealing a fissure in the ground, a jagged opening barely wide enough for a grown man to slip through. A black throat descending into the earth. The entrance to the tunnels. A smell wafted from below. Damp stone. Rust. Old air that hadn't been disturbed in years. And something else beneath it, something sweet and rotten. David clutched his rifle. "He's down there." I didn't disagree. But before we could take a single step, a sound echoed from deep inside the tunnel. Not a scream. Not a voice. A laugh, soft, light, childlike, and wrong in every way. David flinched like someone had stabbed him. "That's Owen. That's my boy." "No," I said, grabbing his arm. "Whatever's down there wants you to think that." He pulled away, eyes blazing with desperation. "I don't care. I'm going." He swung the rifle over his shoulder, dropped to his knees, and slipped into the tunnel's mouth before I could stop him. For a second, I stared into the darkness he vanished into, thick, endless, hungry. Then I followed. Because some nightmares don't let you turn back, no matter how badly you want to. The descent was worse than I expected. The moment I slipped through the narrow opening, the world above vanished like someone had slammed a lid over it. My flashlight beam barely cut 5 feet into the darkness. The walls pressed close around my shoulders, damp and cold, breathing out stale air that tasted like metal and old bones. Ahead of me, David's footsteps echoed, uneven and frantic. "David!" I hissed. "Slow down." He didn't. He couldn't. His desperation ricocheted off the stone walls, turning every breath into a ragged rasp. The tunnel sloped downward, twisting like something alive, forcing me to crouch as the ceiling dropped lower and lower. At one point, my shoulder brushed the wall. And the stone felt warm. Warm like flesh. I jerked back, heartbeat stuttering. When I pressed my light against it, the surface looked normal, rough stone, mineral veins. But the sensation had been real. Too real. This place wasn't just underground. It was alive. Far ahead, David's flashlight flickered as he scrambled around a bend. I followed, scraping my hand along the ceiling just to keep balance. The tunnel opened suddenly, dropping into a wide chamber with walls that glistened like something had been breathing moisture onto them for years. Thin roots dangled from the ceiling like veins. Some twitched when my light hit them. David stood in the middle of the chamber, frozen. "Owen," he called softly. Something answered. Not with words. A soft shuffle. A drag. A faint scuff of tiny feet somewhere deeper inside the dark. Then a giggle. High, bright, childlike, but hollow, like it came from a throat that didn't know how human laughter worked. David lunged toward the sound. I grabbed his jacket, but he ripped free and sprinted down a narrower tunnel on the far side. "David!" I shouted, voice cracking against the stone. "Stop! You don't know what's down there. But he was already gone. I chased him, my boots splashing into water pooled along the floor. The tunnel here felt wrong. Wrong angles. Wrong proportions. Like something had chewed its way through the rock instead of carving it. My flashlight beam jittered across the walls, and caught something that made me stop in my tracks. Scratches. Dozens. Hundreds. Some high, some low. Some deep enough to gouge the stone. Finger marks. Nail marks. Small hands scraped across the walls as if children had been dragged or had clawed trying to escape. My pulse hammered as I scanned the walls. Names were carved into the stone. Faded. Distorted. Half erased by time. Samantha. Lily. Thomas. Evan. Dozens of them. Kids the town had lost. Kids no one ever found. My stomach lurched as I stepped backward. The stories Mrs. Patterson told weren't just history. They were written into the walls. Another sound drifted down the tunnel, this time not a giggle, but a voice. Small. Whispery. Echoing. Dad. David froze up ahead, turning slowly toward the sound. That's him, he breathed. Sheriff, that's my boy. I lifted my gun. No, I whispered. Whatever's speaking, it isn't Owen. Because the voice had something underneath it. Something layered. Something hungry. And the deeper we went, the louder it grew. David moved toward the voice like a sleepwalker, drawn forward by something deeper than logic. Something primal. A father's instinct weaponized against him. I could see it in the way his shoulders shook, in the way his fingers tightened around the rifle until his knuckles went white. David, I whispered, don't answer it. But he did. Owen, buddy. I'm here. I'm right here. The tunnel answered with a soft, echoing breath. Then. Dad, help. Except the voice didn't travel like a real voice. It didn't bounce off the walls the right way. It slid along them. Spread through them. It felt like the stone was speaking. Like the cave itself was trying on the sound of a little boy's voice. I stepped in front of David and aimed my flashlight down the tunnel. The beam lit up nothing but darkness. The kind of darkness that wasn't empty. The kind that watched back. We're not alone, I said quietly. David didn't care. He pushed past me, moving faster. I grabbed his arm but he yanked away, face twisted with grief and desperation. He's hurt. He needs me. Listen to me, I snapped. That thing is. A new sound cut me off. A scraping. Slow. Rhythmic. Like something long was being dragged across stone. David froze. His breath hitched. The tunnel ahead pulsed with movement, faint and almost imperceptible, but enough to tell me the nightmare wasn't stationary. It was coming closer. I raised my gun and flashlight, both trembling just slightly. Back up, I whispered. We need to. Then we saw it. At first it looked like a shape pulling itself out of the shadows. A silhouette that didn't make sense. Too thin. Too tall. Arms that stretched too far, bending where no joints should be. Its head scraping the ceiling, its neck angled like it had been broken and badly reset. And beneath it all, glinting in the flashlight's edge, was a smile. Not on a mouth. But carved across its entire face. A single slit from ear to ear, filled with small, uneven, needle-like teeth. David made a sound, not a scream, not a cry. Something trapped between the two. The creature froze when the light hit it. Not afraid. More like it was studying us. Measuring us. Deciding. Then it moved. Not walking. Not gliding. It folded. Collapsed into itself and then unfurled forward with impossible speed. A stuttering, jolting motion like a puppet yanked on tangled strings. "Run!" I shouted. David was already sprinting, feet splashing through the shallow water. The creature lunged after us, its limbs scraping against the stone walls with a sound that drilled straight into my teeth. I fired 3 rounds behind me. The bullets sparked against stone. The creature didn't flinch. Didn't slow. Didn't care. We tore back through the tunnel we'd come from, breath ragged, lungs burning. The creature's scraping limbs echoed behind us like steel claws dragged across concrete. The chamber ahead finally came into view. But something was different. A faint glow pulsed from the far wall. Soft. Warm. Unnatural. It wasn't fire. Wasn't a flashlight. Wasn't anything human. David stopped dead in his tracks. "Sheriff," he whispered. "What is that?" And then we heard the voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Children. Whispering in unison. Calling our names, the whispers swelled as we stepped into the chamber, soft, layered, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The glow pulsed along the walls, seeping through cracks in the stone like light was bleeding from the earth itself. David froze beside me, eyes wide, breath trembling. "Owen," he whispered. The voices answered instantly. "Dad. Dad. Dad." Dozens of tones. Dozens of pitches. Some high, some broken, some echoing like they came from a throat that hadn't been used in years. They overlapped until hearing them felt like drowning. I swept my flashlight across the chamber. That was when I saw them. Small shapes pressed into the stone. Children. Not bodies. Not ghosts. Not illusions. Impressions, their outlines embedded into the wall like fossils. Small hands, small faces, small limbs, frozen mid-motion. Some reaching out. Some curled up. Some screaming. The pulse of light came from inside them. Their shapes glowed faintly, like whatever they had been wasn't fully gone. David staggered toward the nearest one, fingertips shaking as he reached for the silhouette of a small boy curled against the stone. The wall shivered under his touch. Like it was alive. "Don't touch it." I snapped. But it was too late. The stone rippled like liquid, and the imprint's hand reached out, pressing back against David's palm. He recoiled, stumbling. His face went pale. "Sheriff, it moved. It moved." The chamber trembled. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The whispers grew louder, words forming beneath the noise. "Help us. Stay. Join us." David backed against me, breathing like a man drowning without water. "We need to find him," he whispered. "We need to find Owen now." "We will," I said, even though my voice shook. My flashlight swept across the far side of the chamber, and I saw a smaller tunnel branching off. Narrow. Jagged. Carved by claws, not tools. Fresh. That had to be where the creature took him. But before we could move, the chamber went silent. Completely. The kind of silence that crushes your lungs. Then. A soft patter. Footsteps. Small ones. From the new tunnel. David stepped forward, trembling. "Owen." A figure emerged. A small silhouette. The size of a child. Standing just at the edge of the glow. Bare feet. Thin arms. Head tilted. It stepped closer. The glow touched its face. And I felt my stomach drop through the floor. It was a child, but not. The eyes were wrong. Too glossy. Too wide. Pupils dilated until they swallowed the color. The skin was pale, not from fear, but from something drained out of it. And the smile, God. That smile did not belong on a child. Stretched too far. Too tight. Like something had tugged the corners of its mouth upward and held them there with invisible hooks. David whispered, "Owen." The thing's head twitched so sharply its neck cracked. Then it spoke. Not with a boy's voice. With the layered tone of every whisper in the chamber. "Dad." The word crawled across the stone like a centipede. David took a step toward it. I grabbed him. The creature moved closer, its smile widening unnaturally. Behind us, the walls began whispering again. And from the far tunnel, something massive scraped across stone. Getting closer, the child-shaped thing took another step toward us, and the tunnel behind it pulsed with movement. The air thickened, vibrating with a low hum that crawled under my skin like electricity. My grip on David tightened. "Don't move," I whispered. He didn't listen. He couldn't. "Owen." His voice cracked. Please tell me that's you." The creature tilted its head, jerking in short, unnatural ticks like a glitching animation. Its eyes never blinked. They didn't even shine like normal eyes should. They simply absorbed the light. Then, without warning, it lifted its arm. A small hand. Palm up. Inviting. That simple gesture nearly broke David. His knees buckled as if gravity had doubled. "He always did that," he whispered. "When he wanted to be picked up." "No," I hissed. "It's mimicking him." As if responding to my words, the creature's smile stretched wider. The skin around its mouth tore slightly, revealing thin slivers of red beneath pale flesh. But the tears didn't bleed. Nothing about it was alive in the way a child should be. Before I could pull David back, the stone wall behind us rippled again. Children's impressions shifted, faces bulging outward for a moment before flattening, as if something behind the stone was pressing against it. Trying to follow us, trying to escape. Trying to reach. A wave of whispers washed over us, rising in a panicked chorus. "Don't go. Stay. Join us. He's waiting." The chamber floor trembled, then something massive inhaled from the tunnel behind the creature. A deep, cavernous breath. Wet. Hungry, the child thing jerked at the sound, snapping its head toward the darkness. When it looked back at us, its smile had changed. It wasn't a lure anymore. It was a warning. David whispered, "Sheriff, what's behind it?" I didn't answer. Because the answer slid out of the tunnel a second later. A limb. Long. Bony. Segmented like an insect's. Covered in pale, stretched flesh that clung to it like wet paper. A second limb followed. Then a third. Then a face. If you could call it that. A skull-like shape with no eyes, no mouth, just that carved slit of a grin. Rows of jagged teeth lined end to end, stretching across the curved bone. The smile seemed to pulse, widening with each breath it took. It wasn't coming at us. It was unfolding. Rearing to its full height, filling the entire tunnel, scraping the ceiling with bone-like ridges that made a sound like claws on metal. The child thing turned to look at it, then looked back at us, and stepped aside. Inviting the larger creature forward. David shoved me. "Run." We sprinted toward the chamber entrance, the floor shaking under the creature's movement. Its limbs scraped the tunnel walls, each strike of bone on stone screaming through the dark. Behind us, the child imitation followed, giggling in that layered, broken voice. The walls whispered warnings. The chamber lights flickered. The ground trembled as the bigger creature dragged itself into the open space. David grabbed my shoulder. "Sheriff, it's cornering us." He was right. This wasn't a chase. It was a hunt. And we were already in its jaws that we barely made it through the passage before the chamber behind us exploded with sound. Stone cracked. Something massive slammed its limbs against the walls, forcing its way forward with a hunger so raw it felt like heat on my back. The tunnel shuddered as dust poured from the ceiling. David stumbled ahead of me, gasping for breath, rifle bouncing against his shoulder. "Don't stop!" I shouted. He didn't need the reminder. Behind us came that sound. Not a roar. Not a screech. A grinding. Like bone dragged across stone. A slow, deliberate scrape that promised suffering. The creature wasn't rushing. It was savoring. The tunnel narrowed so quickly I had to turn sideways. I shoved David forward, forcing him through the tightest section. The creature slammed into the wall behind us, shaking loose a rain of pebbles, but the passage was too narrow for its full form. For the moment. The child thing didn't have that problem. It crawled. Not on its hands and knees. On all fours. Back arched. Head hanging upside down as it scuttled across the ceiling, limbs bending at impossible angles. Its too wide smile dripped faint trails of something pale and sticky that hit my shoulder and burned like acid. David screamed when he saw it. I fired once, the muzzle flash illuminating the tunnel in a violent burst. The bullet tore straight through the child thing. It didn't bleed. It didn't react. It just twisted its head back around, smile stretching wider, and kept crawling toward us. "Go, go, go!" I yelled. We broke into another chamber, smaller than the last, with a low ceiling and a pool of pitch-black water in the center. The air here was colder, heavy with a metallic stench that clung to the back of my throat. David stopped suddenly. "Owen," he whispered. A small figure stood on the far side of the pool. Motionless. Facing the wall. Shoulders trembling. "Buddy?" David's voice cracked. "It's me, it's Dad, it's really me." I grabbed him. "David, wait." The boy turned. Not fast. Slowly. Too slowly. Like something inside him controlled the movement from strings buried deep beneath the skin. His eyes were wide and empty. His mouth hung slightly open, stained with dark streaks that weren't blood, but weren't anything clean either. "Dad," he whispered. This time, the voice was closer to human. Closer to his real son. And that made it worse. David collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "Owen, please come here. Please. Please." The boy stepped forward. Once. Twice. Then stopped just at the edge of the pool. Not crossing. Not closing the distance. Waiting. Behind us, the child thing dropped from the ceiling with a wet thud. It skittered along the edges of the chamber, blocking the exit. The tunnels echoed with the grinding limbs of the larger creature, closing in. We were trapped. David shook violently, staring at the boy. "Sheriff, tell me that's him. Tell me my baby's still in there." I lifted my gun with trembling hands. "David," I whispered, "don't move." The boy smiled. Not the child thing's smile. Not the creature's carved grin. A new one. One that split his cheeks in slow, tearing motions like the skin was being pulled apart from the inside. The chamber filled with a wet stretching sound. The pool behind him rippled. And something enormous began to rise from beneath the water. The chamber shook so violently I almost lost my balance. Dust rained from the ceiling in thick clouds, turning the air into choking chalk. David clutched Owen's torn sneaker like it was the last piece of his son left in the world. But the cave didn't care about grief. It wanted blood. A sound rolled through the tunnel behind us. Not footsteps. Not scraping. A thud. A heave. A grotesque, body-wrenching drag as the creature pulled itself fully through the choke point. The wooden support beams trembled. One snapped clean in half. "David, up," I barked, grabbing him by the collar. "If you stay on your knees, that thing is going to peel you like fruit." He stumbled to his feet, still clutching the sneaker, eyes glassy with terror. From the tunnel entrance, a pale limb slithered across the stone, long, jointless, bending like rope. Then another. Then the head emerged, sideways, bones cracking back into place as it angled itself to face us. Its smile hadn't changed. Too wide. Too patient. Too confident. Like it knew every exit. Every path. Every breath we'd take. The chamber had 3 tunnels branching from it. One collapsed. One filled with water. One slanted downward into an even darker passage. None of them felt safe. The creature dragged itself fully into the chamber, its body unfolding, expanding, regaining its impossible height. The ceiling forced it to hunch, but that didn't make it less terrifying. If anything, it made it worse, like an adult crawling into a child's hiding place. "Sheriff." It said my name again, savoring it. Then it sniffed the air. It smelled Owen's sneaker in David's hand. The smile widened. David backed into me, voice cracking. "It has my son. Sheriff, it has my..." The creature lunged. Not at David. At me. Its arms snapped forward, claws slicing across my jacket and shredding fabric like paper. I fired point blank, 3 rounds into its chest. The bullets vanished into it like they'd hit water. No blood. No recoil. No reaction. It just tilted its head as if mildly annoyed. "Move." I shoved David toward the last tunnel, the one slanting downward. We sprinted. Behind us, the creature slammed into the stone wall, shaking the entire cavern. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling. More support beams collapsed. The cave groaned, protesting the weight of something that should not exist. The tunnel ahead was narrower, twisting, slick with moisture. Water dripped from above, each drop echoing like distant footsteps. The scraping returned, louder, faster. It was chasing. David slipped. I grabbed him before he hit the ground. His breath came in sharp, broken gasps. Sheriff, we're not outrunning that thing." "We don't have to outrun it," I said through my teeth. "We just need distance. Enough to hide. Enough to think. Enough to..." A roar shook the tunnel so violently my ears rang. Not anger. Triumph. It could smell Owen's sneaker. It could smell us. The tunnel dipped suddenly and we slid down a slanted slope, crashing into a deeper chamber that reeked of mud and iron and something else. Something warm. I aimed my light at the center of the room. And froze. There were small bones scattered everywhere. Piles and piles. Some clean. Some half-decayed. Some still wrapped in scraps of clothing. David collapsed, choking on a sob. This is where it brings them." But I wasn't looking at the bones anymore. I was looking at the far wall. At something small. Something breathing. Curled in the shadows. A child-sized shape. Still alive. And the worst part? It wasn't alone. Something small moved. Just a twitch. A slow, shivering shift like someone curled into themselves trying not to breathe too loudly. I raised my light. The beam shook in my hand. A child-sized shape sat wedged into a hollow carved into the wall. Knees drawn to chest. Arms wrapped tight around shins. Head down. Hair matted against a filthy forehead. It moved again. Barely. A quivering breath. "Sheriff," David whispered, the word breaking in his throat. Is that?" I held out my arm, blocking him. "Don't go near it. Because something was wrong. Terribly wrong." The child shape didn't lift its head. Didn't turn. Didn't react to our voices or the light. just breathed in these tiny, sharp gasps like its lungs hurt with every inhale. Then I noticed the wall around it. Scratches. Hundreds of them, tiny fingernail marks carved deep into the stone. Desperate. Panicked. Layered on top of each other until the rock was shredded. As if the child had tried to claw its way out and the cave refused to let go. David dropped to his knees, sobbing into his hands. "Owen, if that's you, please look at me." The shape flinched at the sound. Not lifting its head. Just tightening. Curling smaller. Shrinking like the noise itself hurt. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a rescue. This was a cage. And then I heard it. Behind us. Not the creature. Not the scraping. Something else. A second breath. Small. Rapid. Panicked. I whipped my light toward the opposite corner of the chamber that I swallowed hard, my voice barely holding steady. "They're children." And then came the part that froze the blood in my veins. Not all of them were breathing. But the ones that weren't alone. Something deeper in the darkness inhaled with them. Perfectly synced. Like it was inside every breath they took. Like it was keeping them alive, or keeping them trapped. And before I could say anything else, a soft whisper crawled up the back of my neck. "Sheriff." Not behind me. Not ahead. Not from any tunnel. The voice came from inside the chamber. Inside the walls. Inside the children. And all of them, all at once, slowly lifted their heads. Every child-shaped figure in that chamber lifted its head at the same slow, unnatural pace, perfectly synchronized, like invisible strings pulled them all at once. The sound of their collective movement scraped across my nerves. Dozens of small faces turned toward us, pale and hollow-eyed, their expressions identical in a way no living child ever could be. David staggered backward, hitting the wall so hard dust rained down behind him. What is this? Sheriff, what is this? Another shape. Child-sized. Breathing. Curled into the shadows exactly like the first. And as my beam swept deeper into the chamber, more shapes flickered into view, tucked into alcoves, curled against the rock, some so still they looked carved, others trembling like newborn animals. None of them spoke. None of them moved toward us. All of them were hiding from something behind us. David choked on his own breath. "Sheriff, what are they?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. And because speaking felt like stepping on a landmine. The children stared without blinking. No recognition. No emotion. Just the echo of something else living inside them. Then one of them, one closest to the far corner, opened its mouth. At first no sound came out. Just a slow widening of the jaw, wider, far too wide. The skin around the cheek stretched like damp cloth, not tearing, just bending in a way that made my stomach twist. Then. "Do you hear him?" The voice didn't match the child's face. It was layered. Like multiple voices whispering through one throat at once. Another child opened its mouth. Then another. Then the entire chamber filled with overlapping whispers. "He's coming. He's hungry. He wants what you took. He wants what you love." David pressed both hands over his ears, shaking. "Stop, please stop." But the voices crawled across the stone and into the air like smoke. They weren't speaking at us, they were speaking through something. Channeling it. I stepped forward, raising my light. "Where is Owen?" My voice cracked despite every effort to steady it. The children froze. Every mouth snapped shut. Every eye locked onto me. Then, in perfect unison, they pointed. Not at a tunnel. Not at the bones. Not at the creature behind us still forcing its bulk down the passage. They pointed at the floor. I looked down. Hair. A clump of it. Short. Brown. Matted with dirt. David collapsed to his knees with a strangled noise, his hands shaking violently as he reached for it. Before he could touch it, the floor vibrated, just once, like something massive shifted beneath the stone. One of the children whispered. "He's below." Another. "He keeps the brightest ones deepest." A third. "He's close." Then the entire chamber inhaled. Every child. Every shadow. Even the walls seemed to swell with breath. A single whisper rose up from all of them at once, low enough that my bones felt it before my ears did. "Run." Not a threat. Not a taunt. A warning. Seconds later, the main tunnel behind us exploded with a roar that didn't sound like anger anymore. It sounded like arrival. The roar that ripped through the chamber wasn't just loud, it shook the space, vibrating through the stone like thunder trapped in a coffin. Dust poured from the ceiling in thick sheets. The children froze again, every head snapping toward the tunnel like hounds reacting to a master's whistle. David grabbed my arm, voice barely recognizable. "Sheriff, it's here." "Oh God, it's here." I didn't answer. There was no point. The main tunnel, the one we'd slid down, pulsed with movement. A shadow blotted out what little light flickered through the cracks above. Something huge scraped its limbs along the stone, each drag carving fresh grooves into the walls. Then the smell hit, that same metallic, rotten sweetness that filled the deeper tunnels. The smell of something that had fed recently. The children backed away from the tunnel entrance. Not screaming. Not running. Just retreating like soldiers stepping aside for a general. A pale limb slid into view. Not the quick, snake-like slither we'd seen before. This time, it moved slowly, deliberately, savoring the moment. It gripped the floor, long fingers sinking into mud and bone fragments. Another limb followed. The creature didn't rush. Didn't need to. It knew we were cornered. David stumbled backward until his spine hit the far wall. His breath stuttered, coming out in short, sharp bursts. Sheriff, we have to go, there has to be another way out." "There isn't," I whispered. Because the chamber was a trap. Every tunnel out was narrow, twisted, sloping back toward the creature's territory. It crawled forward, forcing its grotesque torso into the room. The ceiling bowed under its height. Bones cracked underfoot as it dragged itself over the scattered remains. Its smile, that carved, permanent grin, glowed faintly in the dark like a crescent of polished bone. It paused when its head cleared the threshold. Tilted once. Twice. Listening. Not to us. To the children. They whispered as one. "He's here." David let out a broken cry. "Owen. Owen, please. Please." The creature snapped toward him instantly. Not turning. Snapping. Its spine made a sound like wet sticks breaking. It sniffed the air in sharp, rapid bursts, inhaling David's scent, the sneaker in his hand, the grief bleeding off him like heat. This thing understood more than flesh. It understood attachment. It understood love. And it hunted it. I lifted my gun, knowing it was useless but needing something between me and the monster. The creature's eyes, or whatever pits it used to see, locked onto me. Its grin stretched wider. Not because I was a threat. Because I wasn't. David choked on a sob, staring at the floor where the clump of Owen's hair lay. The creature followed his gaze. Then its hand, long, spidery, bone-thin, reached forward and dragged its claws slowly across the stone. It wasn't attacking. It was signaling. Like it wanted us to understand something. The children leaned forward, whispering together. "He wants you to come deeper." A shudder ran through me. Deeper meant one thing. Owen was still alive. And the creature knew we would follow. Because that was the real hunt. The whisper rose from the pit like steam off a dying fire. Sheriff. My blood iced. It didn't call David. It didn't call Owen. It wanted me. David crawled backward until his spine hit the far wall, his breath coming in panicked gasps. Sheriff, what is that? What is down there? I kept my gun trained on the pit even though I knew it was nothing more than a comfort object at this point. The pale hand that had lashed upward slowly withdrew, dragging its long fingers across the stone like chalk. Then the pit went silent. Silent in the way a throat tightens right before a scream. I grabbed David by the shoulder. You need to listen to me. Whatever's using Owen's voice, whatever's down there, it's not your son. You go near that edge again, and you'll never come back up. He shook his head violently. I heard him. I heard my boy. He's alive. And that was when the chamber breathed again. Every child-shaped figure along the walls turned toward us. Their eyes glimmered faintly, pupils dilated until their eyes were nothing but black glass. Some tilted their heads. Others leaned forward. All moved in the same eerie rhythm. Then they whispered as one. He is alive. David gasped. I stepped between him and the pit. They're lying. This thing mimics voices. It mimics life. He is alive. The chorus repeated. But then another layer slipped under the voices, something lower, something hungry. For now. The pit rumbled. A pulse of heat rose from below, warm enough to sting my cheeks. Something massive shifted in the darkness beneath us, like a body turning over in a bed of bones. David's resolve cracked. Tears spilled freely now. Sheriff, if he's alive, even a chance. The chamber ceiling shook violently, the creature above us, still clinging like a giant skeletal spider, began to descend, not dropping, lowering itself. Slowly, gracefully. As if savoring the moment it would reach us. I grabbed David's arm so hard I felt bone. We need to move. Now. But Owen. If we die here, your son loses more than a father. I dragged him toward a narrow break in the chamber wall, a crack barely wide enough to squeeze through. The children watched us without emotion, their whispers fading into soft clicks. Behind us, the creature's limbs scraped closer. And the pit breathed. The crack in the chamber wall funneled us into a narrow chute that dropped at a steep angle. My boots lost traction and I slid, dragging David with me. The walls tore at my jacket, scraping my arms raw. Our flashlights bobbed wildly in the dark. Behind us, the creature roared. Not a scream. A command. The stone itself trembled. We hit the bottom hard, skidding across a slick floor. My shoulder slammed into rock so violently it sent bolts of pain down my arm. David collapsed beside me, gasping. The new passage was cramped, ceiling barely 6 feet high, walls pulsing with the faint glow of some fungus that smelled like burnt sugar. Water dripped in steady syncopated beats, echoing like footsteps following us. David wiped blood from his temple. Where are we now? Closer, I said, unable to deny it. If the creature wanted us gone, we'd be gone. It's hurting us. To what? His voice cracked. To him. David's hands shook so hard he almost dropped the toy car. He stared at it like it held the last thread of his sanity. Then we heard it. A soft cry. A real one this time. A child's sob echoing faintly from deeper in the tunnel. David froze. Sheriff. Sheriff, that's him. That's Owen. That's my son. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But the sound wasn't layered like the whispers. It wasn't stretched or warped. It was thin. Broken. Human. We followed it. The tunnel twisted left, then right, then dropped again. More bones appeared on the floor, larger ones now. Older. Some human. Some not. The walls grew warm to the touch, pulsing in slow waves like the heartbeat of something buried deep in the earth. Then we found another chamber. Small. Round. Lit by the faint glow of bioluminescent veins running through the stone. And in the center. A boy. Curled up. Shivering. Arms wrapped tight around himself. Hair matted. Clothes torn. Owen. David fell apart. My boy, oh God. He ran to him before I could stop him. Dropped to his knees. Scooped the child into his arms and sobbed like his chest was caving in. Owen didn't speak. Didn't look up. His fingers twitched against David's shirt, clutching it weakly. His breath shuddered, thin and ragged. He was alive. Barely. I knelt beside them, scanning the chamber, heart pounding. We need to get him out. Now. Before. The boy jerked suddenly. His back arched. A scream tore out of him, raw, sharp, piercing. Not in fear. In warning. Then the chamber behind us roared. The roar crashed into the chamber with enough force to shake loose chunks of stone from the ceiling. Owen convulsed in David's arms, clutching at his father with desperate, frantic strength. David held him tighter. It's okay, buddy, it's okay, I've got you, I've got you. But Owen wasn't clinging in comfort. He was clinging in terror. His eyes opened, wide and glassy, pupils blown wide until his irises were almost gone. And then he whispered. He's coming. I spun toward the tunnel. The creature dropped into view. Not crawling this time. It fell, slamming into the chamber on all fours, limbs splayed, chest heaving as if it had been sprinting. Its carved smile glowed in jagged, crescent arcs. Veins pulsed beneath its pale, translucent skin like worms swimming under ice. It stared at us. At Owen. At David's arms around him. And the smile widened. I raised my gun, even though I knew what would happen. The creature's head tilted as if amused that I still bothered. Sheriff, David whispered, shaking. What do I do? You run, I said. But. You grab your son and you run. Now. The creature lunged. I fired 6 shots into its chest. They passed through like vapor. The bullet struck the far wall and clattered to the floor. David bolted, Owen in his arms. Move! I screamed. Go! Go! The tunnel behind us shook violently as the creature scraped its limbs across the stone, dragging itself forward faster than should have been possible. Its grin stayed locked on us, inches from my face as I sidestepped and slammed my shoulder into its ribs to slow it. It didn't budge. Not even a little. I'm right here. I shouted at it, backing away, buying time. You want someone? Take me. It leaned closer, smile splitting the skin across its cheeks as if stretching beyond its limits. Then. It ignored me. It turned toward the fleeing father and child. I ran. I don't remember my feet touching the ground. I don't remember the burns on my arms from scraping the tunnel walls. I only remember the sound behind me. The rhythmic scraping. The sickening thud of limbs. The creature's breath sliding through the dark like smoke. David reached the chute first. Slipped. Nearly fell. I caught him, shoved him upward, pushed Owen through the opening. Then a claw wrapped around my ankle. The stone floor rushed toward my face as I fell. My flashlight shattered. Darkness swallowed everything. The creature pulled, strong enough to tear bone from socket. And then. A scream. Not mine. Owen's. A raw, terrified plea that filled the chamber like a detonated bomb. Something in the creature hesitated. Just long enough. David yanked me upward. The grip on my ankle slid across my boot, claws shredding leather instead of flesh. We tumbled into the chute. Rolled. Slammed into the deeper tunnel. Behind us, the creature roared. Louder than before. Angrier. Hungrier. But it didn't follow. It stayed below. Because it knew the truth. We weren't escaping. Not really. We were being released. For now. As we crawled out into the cold night air hours later. Owen trembling and silent in his father's arms, I finally understood what Mrs. Patterson meant. Some monsters don't hunt out of hunger. Some hunt out of possession. And this one. It wasn't done with us. Not even close.